as an angel investor, I know how significant the role of an immigration consultant can be for people who want to migrate under startup visa program. The person that I trust most when I work in this program is Dr. Alex Taito, and he's among us with today, and we'll be asking him questions that really help us understand this program more. So welcome, Dr. Alex Taito.
Thank you, Ravi, and I'm here today with you. I'm really glad to help you and your teams and your people to do the right thing when they deal with Immigration Canada.
Good to have you, Dr. Alex. So, as I understand, Dr. Alex, you have been working in the industry for many years, and you helped many teams come here, many individuals come here, under many different business categories. And I know that you specialize in startup visa programs, especially these days. And it's also one of my favorites. But I would like to ask you, why startup visa? Does it make a second sense for you to encourage people under this category for any reasons? Would you like to highlight this?
Well, first of all, we keep in mind the best interests of a client. That's paramount. And when we do that, we have to select what's best for them, not for us.
Right.
As a matter of fact, on fee side, on legal fee side, we can probably make more money if we suggest something else.
Right.
But we don't do that because that will lead to more expenses on the client side. That's one of the reasons I like this program, because when we work with startup, we're able to deliver what people in business like the most, the budget.
Right.
We say how much it's going to cost, we see what's going to happen, we see the schedule, we set it in motion, and we achieve result on time and on schedule and on budget.
Mm-hmm.
And for people in business, I just don't see anything that they don't like.
Right.
Second reason why we like startup, because of certain approach from government. For example, people under other programs have to provide high level of English. Medium level of English is sufficient under startup, which is great, and great news for from many countries we work around the world. I see how difficult it is to pass the IELTS test. The second reason, it's also difficult for business people, especially entrepreneurs from certain countries, to prove what we call source of income. And for many programs, actually all other programs require that. And that's a breaking point.
Right.
Because how people can prove something that they acquire or receive as inheritance or made the first dollar when they start working 20, 30 years ago. It's almost impossible. And that's the deal breaker for many other programs. People don't understand that. And another plus for busy professionals who work with us, and why they work with us, because we can offer the flexible schedule. Right. People don't have to meet certain residency requirements, like, for example, in famous provincial nominee program. When you have to spend in Canada 75% of the time. You actually losing business income in your country, you come in and spending a lot of money in this country, and there is no hope because you have to pass through two procedures. And that's the last point, but not least, for to benefit from startup, because you start federal program right away.
Right.
You directly proceed to federal and ultimately the final permanent residency processing. That's incredible, and that's what people in business like the most.
Right. So let me ask you this. You're certified by the Government of Canada to participate in this program. What is your role here? What do you do?
The role is complex, and we normally start from the beginning when what we call, we apply onboarding process and procedures. We have to see if people qualify. For you as an investor, you want to know that you don't invest your time, effort, and money into someone who will be disqualified later on.
Right.
So the first role is to assess people who come in on board if they actually fit the program.
Right.
Then the combination of factors kicks in. We have to prepare people for designated organization procedures. We have to prepare them from the personal perspective. We have to assess their background and streamline everything in their past so we can present it to the government in the right way. Right. So that's role number one. Second role, of course, to actually file applications.
Right.
And people sometimes underestimate this. They say, well, I can complete form and file. That's a very small part of the process. Completing the form is small part of the process. You have to accompany that form with all supporting materials.
Right.
And another angle, government does not provide comprehensive checklists. They just provide the general checklist that people can see as general direction. If you really want to succeed, you want to provide government with what they're looking for. And what they're looking for is full picture that people can assess while they're looking at the file. Because immigration officers, they're very limited in time and ability to assess everyone. So they're almost instinct to refuse.
Right.
They're looking for reason to refuse. People don't know this, but it's true. And knowing that from inside, we definitely trying to match their expectation. And final, people don't understand the role. It's like insurance.
Right.
You don't understand how insurance can help until accident happened, right? And that's exactly where we come to light again during the process when immigration has some concerns or sending inquiry for additional documentation or want to see something else or peer review come into play. Many things come into play on a daily basis and people don't understand that when they start. And that's what we do. We represent, we protect, we serve, and we deliver. And when people come into Canada, they actually happy, and many of them stay with us, and we apply for their relatives to come, for them to apply for citizenship later on. It's a long-term relationship, how I see this.
Wonderful. So it's a complex process, as you say, but you also seem to have simplified it somewhere.
Yes, keep it simple. That's
Yeah.
our principle.
So talking about the complexity of this program, and you also mentioned that you simplified the process. There would be some pitfalls, there would be some barriers that come along the way. So can you enlighten us with something that you have in your experience? What would you say to that?
Well, I would say you're absolutely right. It is a complex program, and the way we try to simplify it, mostly we try to simplify it for clients. We know the process is complicated, but we try to take that part on us, and we navigate clients so they don't feel that complexity, and they don't overwhelmed by the process because they have own lives, businesses, families, they have own obligations. We understand that. And being an immigrant ourselves, like all people working in a team, almost 25 now, they're all immigrants in first or second generation. So that means they understand the pain of going through this. And to make it painful even more, it's not our goal. So simplicity is the goal. But how we achieve this? We break the process in certain stages and what we call cut in chewable pieces. People can eat it, people can understand it. And we definitely trying to achieve a goal on each stage before we proceed to next stage. And sometimes we use procedures that go like a red line through the whole process, through all procedures. And that helps people to see the whole behind the parts. And that's very helpful too, because they have to understand that every move on certain stage helps them in 2 months, in 6 months, in 1 year, and that's exactly how we present it. So complexity is inevitable part, but we try to take it on us, and that's, in my view, that's what people retain our services for.
So Alex, you've been working with this program, as I understand, since almost the inception of the program, since it was made a mainstream program after being a pilot for some time. It's a fairly new program. It hasn't been around for many years, but still, people sometimes talk in the industry. When I get approached by different stakeholders, they ask me this question: Is this program going to be there forever? Are there any changes expected in this program? Do you see something like that happening in the near future?
Oh, most certainly. First of all, yes, I was involved in the program from inception, since 2013 when it was introduced. And as a matter of fact, in 2014 in April, I provided the first actually ever seminar on CPD hours on continuous professional education for lawyers and consultants on the subject. And it was surprising that it took government like 5 years to keep it as a pilot, because it was almost ruined. Well, no one trusts the pilot, and investors specifically. And in 2018, when it was converted, then the whole thing started unfolding. As you may imagine, any new program with like 5-year-old history, obviously it's evolving. Of course, we expect some changes. In which area? Well, I don't have that crystal ball with me, but I anticipate some changes in regulatory requirements, maybe tightening some standards. And what we monitor all the time, we monitor closely how government is assessing every single file, because they do improve their services, they do provide higher due diligence level, and they definitely raise the threshold for certain parts of the application. So people who think it's just do nothing and whatever happened before will be sustained, no, it's not that. And by the way, that's exactly the role of Immigration Council as we see it. As we involve on a daily basis, we inside the process, and we can navigate people with all the background that we collect from all the files we serve, and we serve hundreds and hundreds. So we definitely improve our relationship with each new client based on our relationship and experience with other clients who came before them. So yes, it's evolving. Yes, we anticipate some changes. Like I said, it's probably towards tightening some rules and regulations and requirements, but the program's still the best business program ever. And by the way, Canadian program is the best in the world in terms of startups. Yeah.
So let me ask you this. This is my favorite question. It's a favorite question because I get asked this question many a times. Timelines. Now, how long does it take? As we know that Canadian immigration programs, some of them they take forever. Especially business immigration programs are known, they're notorious for taking forever. Mm-hmm. Some of them have been shelved only because they were taking way too long. So what's happening with startup visa today? As I understand, there were times when this program was being processed, the applications were being processed very quickly. Yeah. Is that the case right now also? And how do you see that happening in the future? So enlighten us about the overall processing times.
Well, first of all, you touched a very interesting point in my heart. We process the fastest. When we processed it before pandemic, we hold a record of 55 days, less than 2 months.
Wow.
And investors were happy, clients were happy, everybody was happy, and people who anticipated them in Canada in terms of partners and vendors, they were happy too. But it was a record before pandemic. Pandemic was a hit that no one expected, but what I would like to address is definitely not forever. Right. Okay, forever is not for this program. And by the way, there is a political meaning in this program too, still, because Government of Canada prioritize intellectual property argument here. So they would like to be competitive on international market. In North America, they definitely want to compete with Silicon Valley. Of course, ability of Canada to absorb and create entrepreneurs and innovative component as a whole is way weaker than Silicon Valley alone in one state of California. But what we're talking about is attempt. And in attempt, Government of Canada is doing what they're supposed to do. They process these files as fast as they can. That means we still observe the fastest processing on this program among other business programs. It's all relative term, right? So before pandemic, it was fastest. Now it is fastest, but it's longer than it was before pandemic.
Right.
On the other hand, the Government of Canada present the timeline they're comfortable with. 32 months, 30 months. Why it is there? First of all, they always looking back in a rear view mirror. That's basically what it is. They look back and they count those 20 months of pandemic in it. And it's pretty much in line with what we anticipate, because our time is anywhere between 12 and 20 months, the real time. And we process people on a regular basis. We see what's going on in different consulates around the world, and we see Why we see this? Because we land people every day, practically every day. We have notifications because hundreds of clients simultaneously in process. We observe it firsthand practically every day. Government of Canada acting on startup visa from different perspectives, different timelines on those, but the tendency we observe is to cut time shorter, which is a good positive sign for us.
So what you're saying is that the average time that it takes essentially in different for different clients is different than what the government website would say.
It's shorter. It is shorter.
Yeah.
It is shorter, and simply put, because it's a cut-off time, what they said almost 2 years ago, because they were just getting out of pandemic, and of course they counted pandemic time, and how government calculate the time they publish, they always look back and say, well, this is up to date, the longest file we ever found.
Right.
And it's significant because they can find some complicated file somewhere in the world in the slowest consulate ever and with the most complicated case ever. And we have cases like this, like people with multiple refusals, people with multiple citizenships, people with multiple residency documents, and it's complicated for government to dig into. That they take that file and they process that file as a sample file.
Right.
So, like in any scientific experiment, if you take wrong samples, you probably take wrong results.
Right.
But what we practice with real people in real world, and we work actively across Middle East and MENA region. We go in all the way to India, very actively in India, and we go in beyond that. We go in further to Far East, and we go in further to Latin America. So Africa is a big continent for us too in terms of client base. And considering how people migrate these days, we have clients of Indian origin, for example, applying from Africa, or applying through Dubai, applying through Abu Dhabi or Qatar. It's all normal for us. So we see where people positioned, and I would say it's not one model fits all in terms of time. But we encourage people to focus on approximately 20 months processing, plus minus, and that's fair to say it is what we observe now.
Right, and anyway, it's a landscape which keeps on changing. It's a very dynamic landscape, so we need to keep that in mind. Yeah. So now you mentioned somewhere that some people come with multiple refusals, or some people have one problem or the other. Now, and I get asked this question, so sometimes people ask me, look, I had a refusal in the past, whether visitor visa, student visa, work permit, or whatever. So if somebody has a prior refusal, does that in any way affect his or her application under this program?
Affect, yes.
Yeah.
Prevent from applying, no. We usually identify the area where people cannot reapply, or cannot reapply for a certain time. Like in case of misrepresentation, it's 5-year ban, and people have to be very, very careful about that, because many people who apply before, they tend to trust some agency or some consultant or even lawyer, and they just screwing this up because they don't have that application. Right. So now they present something to the immigration service and they see discrepancy. And they fail because of that, because misrepresentation is a tough charge to beat. There is no appeal rights. It's just, we call it over for 5 years and maybe beyond that. Medical reasons can be more or less permanent, because if somebody was refused for medical inadmissibility, unlikely it will be favorable for them to apply. And same goes with other, like criminality issue or security issue. It's hard to overcome security, because if you're part of, let's say, terrorist organization, and you were part of this before, unlikely they will trust you again that you quit and you never do something wrong again. That sort of thing we have to keep in mind when people ask, and most definitely, that's exactly why the role of Immigration Council is critical. We have to see everything in the background, so moving forward, you're not wasting time as venture capital or angel investor. In this case, you're not wasting your resources on someone who is not qualified.
Absolutely.
And it can be discovered later on. And discovery is a very, very difficult process.
So the process is long, complex, cumbersome, but eventually people make it here. They become permanent residents after having gone through a long journey. But what happens after that? What happens to the project? Let's say if people start this venture here and it fails. What are the options here? Do they lose their permanent residency or what?
No, and that's the cornerstone of this program, because many entrepreneurs worry about that, and rightly so. And I would like to address people who ask that question first to the government website, because when the program started, we insisted and government supported the idea that upon arrival to Canada, everybody will be Canadian with own set of rights and responsibilities. And based on that, we definitely tell people that we support the position of the government, as funny as it sounds, but we support it because government itself clearly stated, if your business fail, will you lose PR? No, you're going to keep it. But from another angle, from another vantage point, I would say people are more interested what they're going to do with the business if they arrive to Canada and they have this venture, they have this startup, and now they're Canadians, and now they have all rights to do whatever they want. We normally explain to people, and obviously it must be assessed very carefully, because investors involved, their life involved, and their families involved, and of course they have to consider all parts of the process. But in general, again, legally speaking, they have three options. They can close the business, because like any Canadian, they can open, close the business as they wish. They can change the profile of the business, because by the time they hear of idea maybe not that innovative and they would like to move forward with something else, or they can completely change not just the direction of the business, but the whole business, keeping the title. And it also depends on who will stay with the business, because circumstances of life can make a toll on people and on business. And some people may need to take a break. And it doesn't mean they have to do something other people want. We always advocate for freedom of will, and how people proceed with business, it's their choice. But obviously, we always ask them to consider other people's will, and in our approach, I think this reciprocity is the key here. And how people decide the life of the business and the future of the business, the fate of the business, it will be up to them. But we respect and ask them to respect others. That's the major point for us. And because we know how to deal with this, we just need to know what they want.
Exactly. So that's actually interesting. As an investor, I would love my team to continue working here once they come here. But that you rightly summed it up, that the options are there.
Yes.
Various options are there, whether they exercise them or not.
It's like keeping door open, and people not panicking because they're not claustrophobic. So.
Right. So that's a good scenario for everybody.
Yes.
Not for an investor maybe as much, but yes, that's life. I guess.
That's life. And sometimes for investors too. We always talk to investors. We deal with multiple investors on venture capital front, on angel investor front. I always tell people sometimes cut losses at certain point is better than continue lose money. Okay. So it's all about understanding of business, and that's probably why we're ahead of many, because we came from the business, we focus on business, we provide business immigration as our core service, and that's exactly what we actually stand for.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Alex.
You're welcome.
Was really nice of you to have shared your thoughts. I mean, this was enlightening in many ways. So that was Dr. Alex, guys. Feel free to ask any questions if you have. Dr. Alex interpreted the immigration law in a very beautiful way, but there's still a lot of other aspects that you would want to know. Feel free to get in touch with us. Thank you for joining us today.